I was heading back from supper at my son's place when a text arrived from an unfamiliar number. Remember to watch your surroundings. My pulse dropped with alarm. Is this some kind of warning? I responded, my hands shaking as I keyed in the words. Yet the reply caught me off guard. This is deliverance. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to the channel and share your location in the comments. The hammering at my front entrance broke the nighttime stillness like a mallet smashing through a window pane. 3 forceful, insistent raps that hinted at urgency and suppressed fury. Open the door! I know you're inside. Jasper's shout pierced the wooden barrier, his tone elevated beyond normal, laced with a tension that twisted my gut. I placed my mug aside, the china clinking sharply against the plate with unexpected vigor. My spectacles slid along my nose as I moved toward the foyer, already anticipating the tempest lurking just outside. The instant I twisted the metal knob, Jasper shoved by me uninvited. His attire was creased, perspiration dotting his brow despite the mild spring night. His fingers quivered faintly as he raked them through his tousled locks, and his gaze flitted about the parlor like a trapped beast scanning for exits. Dad, I require $150,000 right away. The plea spilled out in a hurried gasp. This is about survival. I shut the door with measured composure, observing my 38-year-old offspring stride back and forth over the wooden planks like a confined hunter. His breaths came heavy, his actions twitchy and erratic. Survival. I folded my arms, sensing the accustomed burden of letdown pressing on my heart. Jasper, how often have I encountered this refrain? You fail to grasp it. He whirled about, his features reddened with dread and ire. These folks aren't playing games. The antique clock in the nook ticked reliably, counting the moments of quiet that extended between us. I examined my son's countenance, observing the shadows beneath his eyes, the rhythmic tightening of his jaw. This wasn't merely another betting obligation. This ran deeper, more perilous. And I'm serious too. I maintained an even tone, despite my accelerating heartbeat. That's sufficient. It's time to sort yourself out. Jasper's hand slammed onto the oak dining surface with a resounding smack that reverberated through the space. The robust antique, a relic passed down through 3 lineages, took the impact without flinching. But Jasper's knuckles emerged reddened, and I noticed him flinch. You have no clue what you're refusing, he snarled, nursing his sore hand. These aren't the sort who tolerate delays. I shifted to my easy chair, easing into the familiar hide with habitual grace. The spot afforded me a direct line of sight to Jasper as he restarted his agitated marching, his steps forming an uneven cadence on the timber floor. Explain these individuals to me, I murmured. Jasper halted, facing away. For an instant, the sole noises were the clock's ticking and his uneven respiration. When he pivoted, a change had occurred in his demeanor. The fear lingered, but beneath it lay something tougher, more scheming. Tony Castellano and his partner. They managed dealings across the South Side. His words fell to a hush. I took a loan to settle earlier obligations.
And now you've buried yourself further than before.
I concluded the thought with a sigh that originated deep within. Jasper, I've been extracting you from pits for 2 decades. Each instance you vow it's the final one. He neared my seat, sinking to one knee next to it. Briefly, he resembled the young child who'd clamber into my embrace after bad dreams, craving solace and safety. But the likeness was surface level. The gaze that locked with mine contained no purity, only urgency and thinly veiled cunning. This occasion is unique, Dad. They set a deadline for tomorrow evening. If I don't deliver, he gulped visibly, his throat working. They displayed images of what befalls those who default. The gravity of his statement hung in the atmosphere like haze. I scrutinized his expression, hunting for honesty amid the strata of terror and strategy. Beyond the walls, a neighbor's hound yelped once, then hushed. $150,000, I echoed deliberately. Where precisely did this sum vanish, Jasper? His stare drifted from mine, fixing on a point beyond my shoulder. Poker, big money matches, and underground spots. I was on a streak for weeks, Dad. I was nearly free of it all. And then you squandered everything. The routine was as foreseeable as dawn and beyond. Jasper's fingers balled into fists beside him. You can't comprehend the experience. The strain, the strategies, the thrill when the hands align just so. I'm skilled at this, Dad. I simply need one additional opportunity to know. The denial emerged firmer than planned. I refuse. Jasper's visage altered in a flash. The facade of despair crumbled, exposing something nastier below. His eyes tightened, and when he uttered words, his tone bore a poison I'd never detected prior. You've always been self-centered. All your affection flowed to that business. I stayed planted in my chair, regarding this outsider donning my son's likeness. The antique clock persisted in its constant beat, unconcerned by the turmoil unfolding in my parlor. I labored for you for your tomorrow, I stated softly. For my tomorrow. Jasper's chuckle was harsh, acrid. He recommenced his striding, his motions more hostile now, arms flailing erratically. You don't even recall my birth date. October 15th, I responded without pause. And I recollect every present you damaged or pawned. The accuracy of it froze him in his tracks. His complexion darkened further, and for a second I glimpsed remorse cross his traits, before wrath overtook it entirely. That's correct. Fling it at me. His volume escalated to nearly a yell. Every error, every flop, you maintain a mental tally of all my shortcomings, right? I observed him whirl through the space like a gale, bumping the low table, causing my nightly periodical to slip to the ground. The light fixture on the end stand wobbled as he veered too near, his actions growing more unpredictable. I maintain a tally of affection, I remarked, my voice firm amid the disorder. Every occasion I retrieved you from the authorities, every liability I settled, every fresh start I offered. Affection, he twisted around, his eyes frenzied. You label dominance as affection. You label scheming as affection. The paradox of his accusation lingered in the space dividing us. Here stood my offspring, who'd just tried to sway me via intimidations and pitiful tales, charging me with the exact conduct he'd mastered. I adjusted in my seat, the hide squeaking gently. Jasper, take a seat. Let's discuss this rationally. Rational? His voice fractured. There's no rationality in being marked for harm. There's no rationality in knowing that tomorrow evening, if I lack their funds, they'll... He ceased, his fingers combing through his hair once more, rendering it even messier. Sweat had permeated his garment despite the chilly night breeze seeping through the panes. You'll rue this, old-timer. The phrase emerged low, menacing. It permeated the room like a tangible entity, rendering the atmosphere dense and hazardous. For the initial time since his arrival, I experienced a shiver unrelated to the climate. Jasper advanced to the fireplace shelf, where kin portraits stood aligned neatly. His palm lingered above them briefly before choosing the silver-encased image of Mabel, himself as a lad, and me. We were at Navy Pier, Mabel's grin beaming youthful Jasper atop my shoulders, all of us narrowing our eyes against the sunlight. With intentional leisure, he raised the frame to his sightline. Perhaps it's time you discovered true repercussions. The frame escaped his grasp. Or maybe he released it. The silver casing hit the wooden floor with a piercing snap, and the glass fractured into a web over our likenesses. The noise appeared to resound longer than logic permitted. For a beat, we both gazed at the ruined picture. Mabel's face was split by a lengthy fissure, and Jasper's boyhood form was splintered into 3 distinct segments. Leave, I uttered softly. Jasper stood tall, flicking non-existent lint from his rumpled top. The action was nearly nonchalant, but I could discern his hand still trembled. You'll reconsider, he declared, heading for the entry. When you comprehend what you've caused, you'll contact me. I won't. He lingered at the doorway, his fingers on the jamb. For a fraction, I believed he might express regret, might reveal some hint of the boy I'd nurtured. Instead, he grinned, a frigid look that failed to touch his eyes. We'll see. The door banged shut behind him with sufficient power to shake the glass. The abrupt hush felt stifling after the whirlwind of his visit. I lingered in my chair, hearing his footfalls diminish along the path, then the roar of his vehicle's motor igniting and departing. Only then did I rise and near the shattered frame. Kneeling cautiously, I collected the fragments, observing how the break had divided us. Mabel isolated on one portion, Jasper and me on the other. The metaphor was so apt it seemed deliberate. The shard sliced my digit as I hoisted the biggest piece, and a bead of blood dripped onto Mabel's splintered grin. I transported the impaired photo across the residence, extinguishing lamps Jasper had left glaring in his trail. My steps rang empty on the timber as I proceeded to the den, each stride calculated and purposeful. The dwelling seemed altered now, as though his fury had etched unseen marks on the surfaces. My den greeted me with accustomed coziness. Volumes bound in hide adorned the walls, their backs reflecting the gentle glow from the metal desk light. Honors from Wells Tech Solutions shone subtly from their spots amid kin snapshots and keepsakes. This chamber contained the buildup of 4 decades of upright labor, prudent strategy, and controlled achievement. I positioned the fractured frame on my workstation and decanted 2 measures of scotch from the glass carafe Mabel had presented for our 20th milestone. The golden fluid captured the illumination, and I caught myself peering into its essence as if pursuing solutions. The high-backed seat near the modest hearth embraced me like a longtime companion. From here I could survey all that counted: the picture collections on the bottom rack, the storage unit housing vital papers, and the desk where I'd forged the choices that constructed our clan's stability. Mabel always remarked, "Urban, you're too lenient with the lad." I addressed the damaged image, her split smile somehow still luminous. If she lived, she'd have halted this folly ages ago. I flipped open the kin volume, leaves murmuring as I leafed through. There was Jasper at 6, missing teeth and beaming next to his initial bike. At 12, moody in his youth baseball gear after abandoning Midway. At 16, posed by the automobile I'd acquired for him, the very one he'd wrecked 3 months on while competing with pals. Each snapshot narrated a tale of promise wasted, of opportunities extended and discarded. But there were additional snapshots concealed behind these domestic recollections. I extracted a plain envelope marked Jasper Fiscal Logs and dispersed its items over the low table. Account summaries, vouchers, payment stubs, the documentary evidence of 2 decades of indulgence. My fingers operated instinctively, adding machine snapping as I summed the figures. Vehicle installments, coverage settlements, attorney costs, wagering arrears. The totals ascended relentlessly: 20,000, 50,000, 85,000, 137,000, 462,000. The sum glared from my jotter, inscribed in my precise script: sufficient to purchase a dwelling, to launch a modest enterprise, to ensure a pleasant withdrawal for one who'd toiled honorably all their days. I savored the scotch, sensing its sting course down my gullet. Outside, the vicinity was easing into nocturnal peace. Somewhere a TV droned, its canned laughter wafting through ajar sashes. Ordinary households leading ordinary existences, likely oblivious that their neighbor was computing the price of his own child's downfall. The marriage portrait with Mabel captured my focus next. We were youthful back then, brimming with aspirations and schemes. She'd been an educator, sensible and insightful in manners that required years for me to truly value. Even then, she'd fretted over indulging prospective offspring. Youngsters require limits, she'd stated during one of our midnight talks about forming a family. Affection without bounds isn't affection. It's injury masked as care. I deemed her excessively wary then. Now seated amid the proof of my paternal shortcomings, her phrases seemed foretelling. The blaze popped quietly, projecting flickering shades across the chamber. I recalled my own father, a strict figure who instilled the merit of diligence via demonstration rather than gifts. When I desired a bike, I'd earned it by assisting in his workshop after classes. When I'd smashed his pickup at 17, I'd covered the fixes from my own reserves. "You forged a man from me, Dad," I murmured to the embers. "What have I forged from my son?" The response resided in the shattered image on my desk, in the envelope of vouchers, in the recollection of Jasper's icy grin as he'd intimidated me in my own abode. I sealed the fiscal logs with resolute closure, each sheet gliding into position with a hush of determination. The kin volume came next, its mass considerable in my grasp. These remembrances would endure, but the cycle they chronicled would cease. The antique clock in the parlor rang 10 chimes, its resonant tones vibrating through the dwelling. Outside, the final evening runners had gone by, leaving merely the soft stir of breeze amid the oaks. I drained the scotch and secured the envelope in my desk compartment. The lock clicked with a gentle snap that resonated with conclusiveness. Whatever followed, whatever intimidations Jasper might fulfill, I would not yield. He was 38. If he was to grasp accountability, it must occur now in the toughest manner feasible. The fractured image snared the waning fireglow one final time before I doused the light and ascended to rest. The periodic summaries merged indistinctly on my workstation as I attempted to redirect my focus to commerce. 18 hours had elapsed since Jasper's volatile exit. 18 hours of fitful slumber disrupted by visions of his frosty grin and the noise of shattering crystal. I'd reached Wells Tech Solutions at 9 precisely, trusting the routine of earnings edges and industry evaluations would purge my thoughts of domestic turmoil. The panorama from my edge suite typically granted me serenity. Lake Michigan extending boundlessly to the skyline, the structured exactness of Chicago's central towers. Today it resembled peering through jail grates, I realigned the kin portrait on my desk, this one whole depicting Mabel and Jasper in brighter days at Navy Pier. The disparity with the prior night's ruin constricted my chest. My assistant's voice buzzed via the speaker, snapping me from my rumination. "Mr. Wells, your son Jasper is on line 2. The phrase lingered in the air like vapor. I fixed on the flashing crimson indicator on my telephone. My palm halted midway to the handset. 15 seconds ticked by. 20. The light maintained its steady throb, awaiting my choice. At last, I laid aside my writing tool and sat straighter in my hide seat, bracing for another onslaught. "Hello, Jasper. Dad, I wish to express regret for yesterday. I was mistaken." The voice was utterly altered, gentle, modest, devoid of the previous day's malice. I clutched the receiver firmer, probing for the snare concealed in those unforeseen phrases. "This is unforeseen, Jasper. Violet pointed out how much you've provided for me through the years." His inflection bore authentic remorse or expert mimicry of it. I allowed my anxiety to dominate and I voiced awful things. "Will you join us for supper this evening, please?" I discovered myself inscribing supper Jasper 7 p.m. in my schedule ledger before my logical side intervened. The implement felt weighty in my grip as I observed the notation form on the sheet. "All right, what time?" "7:20, and Dad?" A hesitation infused with what appeared like sincere feeling. "I'm genuinely sorry." The connection severed, leaving me gazing at the device as if it could clarify the occurrence. My son, who a day prior had menaced me in my own residence, was now extending an invitation to supper with contrition and meekness. I reclined in my seat, observing the afternoon gloom advance over the economic documents strewn on my desk. The figures held no significance now, mere dark. The Chicago traffic hummed 23 floors below, a distant reminder of the normal world continuing its predictable patterns, while my family teetered on the edge of something I couldn't yet name. I touched the intact family photo again, studying Jasper's young face before gambling had carved lines of desperation around his eyes, before money had become the only language he spoke fluently. My business instincts, honed by 4 decades of negotiations and deals, screamed warnings, but beneath the weariness was something more dangerous: hope. The treacherous possibility that my son had finally reached the bottom and was ready to climb back up. I glanced at my watch. Hours until dinner. 5 hours to decide whether I was walking into reconciliation or a carefully laid trap. The afternoon stretched ahead like a question mark, and I had no idea what answer awaited me in Wicker Park. The drive home through Chicago's evening traffic gave me too much time to think. Radio stations blurred together as I searched for distraction, finally settling on classical music that matched my contemplative mood. By the time I reached Oak Park, doubt had crystallized into certainty that something was wrong with Jasper's sudden transformation. My bedroom welcomed me with familiar order, suits arranged by color in the walk-in closet, Mabel's photograph smiling from the nightstand, everything in its designated place. I stood before the mirror, adjusting my tie for the 3rd time, watching my own uncertainty reflected in my eyes. The navy blue suit felt appropriate, respectful, but not ostentatious, showing I took the dinner invitation seriously without appearing desperate for reconciliation. I checked my wallet methodically. Credit cards, cash, business cards. My phone showed full battery, which I noted with the precision of a man who'd learned to prepare for every contingency. In my study, I paused before the telephone, weighing my options. Mabel's voice echoed in my memory. "Trust but verify, Urban. Hope for the best but prepare for the worst." I dialed Martin's number, listening to it ring twice before his familiar baritone answered. "Urban, everything all right?" "Martin, if I don't call you by midnight, check Jasper's apartment." I kept my voice level. "Matter of fact, 1247 North Winchester, Unit 3B, I pause. You want to tell me what's going on?" "Probably nothing. Just a humor and old man's paranoia." "You got it. Be careful, Urban." I hung up and made one final circuit of the house, checking locks with unusual attention to detail, the security system armed with a soft beep, the housekeeper's note updated with my destination. Each action was methodical, businesslike, as if I were preparing for a board meeting rather than dinner with my son. The cracked family photo from last night caught my eye as I passed the living room. Mabel's face, bisected by that spiderweb of broken glass, seemed to watch me with concern. I touched the frame gently, remembering her warnings about being too soft with Jasper, too willing to excuse his behavior. "Maybe you were right all along," I whispered to her image. Outside, my car waited in the driveway like a faithful animal. I chose the Buick instead of the Mercedes. Modest transportation for what I hoped would be a humble evening. The keys felt cold in my hand as I settled behind the wheel, adjusting the mirrors with unnecessary precision. For a moment, he simply sat there, engine off, watching the sun set behind the oak trees that gave our neighborhood its name. Normal families were settling in for normal evenings, homework, and television. Simple conversations over simple meals. When had my life become so complicated that having dinner with my own son required strategic planning? I thought about Jasper's voice on the phone, that unfamiliar humility. Was it possible? Could a man change so completely in 18 hours? My business experience said, no, but my heart whispered maybe, just maybe. The engine turned over smoothly, and I backed out of the driveway with the deliberate care of someone who suspected this might be a significant journey. Wicker Park was 35 minutes away through evening traffic. 35 minutes to either salvage a relationship or walk into whatever trap my son had prepared. As I turned onto the main road, leaving the safety of my suburban sanctuary behind, I realized I was about to discover which possibility awaited me. The converted brownstone on North Winchester looked tired in the fading daylight, its brick facade weathered by Chicago winters and neglect. I parked across the street, noting the contrast between this neighborhood and my own. Urban decay creeping through the cracks. Young professionals gentrifying block by block. Old-timers clinging to familiarity. Jasper met me at the apartment door with an embrace that lasted a beat too long, his grip surprisingly strong. Dad, thank you for coming. It means everything. The performance began immediately. His smile was perfect, warm but not overeager. Apologetic without being servile. Either my son had genuinely transformed overnight, or he'd spent considerable time rehearsing this version of himself. Violet's been cooking all afternoon, he said, leading me into the small living room where mismatched furniture tried to create harmony. She's so excited to see you. Violet appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on Addish towel, her smile bright but strained around the edges. Mr. Wells, welcome. I hope you're hungry. The apartment revealed their financial reality and careful details. Carpet that needed replacing, a coffee table bearing ring stains from countless meals, bills stacked on the side table with glimpses of red overdue stamps. But everything was clean, and Violet had tried to make it welcoming with plants and family photographs. During dinner, Jasper performed his redemption with Academy Award precision. Dad, I've decided to quit gambling forever. I know how much pain I've caused you and I want to make it right. That's wonderful to hear, son. I watched his face carefully, noting how his eyes didn't quite match his words. What changed your mind? Seeing you yesterday, realizing what I was putting you through. Violet helped me understand that I was destroying everything that mattered. Violet's phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at it quickly, her face paling. Excuse me, I need to check this message. Everything all right, Violet? You seem troubled. No, just work. Her laugh was too high, too quick. Principal wants teachers to review lesson plans over the weekend. But her hands trembled as she set the phone down, and I noticed she'd received 7 messages during our meal. For a teacher on a Tuesday evening, that seemed excessive. Jasper filled the silences with stories of his newfound perspective, each anecdote polished and unconvincing. He asked about my business with unusual interest, inquired about my health with exaggerated concern, reminisced about family memories with forced nostalgia. Remember when we went fishing at Lake Geneva? He said, refilling my wine glass. You taught me patience that day. I remembered that trip differently. Jasper complaining about the early hour, abandoning his fishing rod after 20 minutes, spending the day sulking in the cabin. But I nodded and smiled, playing my own role in this strange theater. Violet grew increasingly agitated as the evening progressed. She dropped her fork twice, spilled water reaching for the salt, and jumped visibly each time her phone buzzed. When she excused herself to the kitchen, I heard whispered conversation, though with whom I couldn't tell. She's been stressed about work, Jasper explained, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Budget cuts. You know how schools are. I studied the apartment while he spoke, noting details that told their real story. Poker chips visible in a drawer he'd opened carelessly. Empty wine bottles lined up by the back door. More than 2 people should accumulate quickly. A gym membership cancellation notice on the counter. The meal is delicious, I said truthfully. Violet had prepared herb-crusted chicken with evident care despite their obvious financial constraints. "You're lucky to have such a thoughtful wife." Jasper's smile flickered for just a moment. "Yes, she's very supportive." When Violet returned from another mysterious phone call, her wedding ring caught the light. She'd been twisting it constantly, a nervous habit that spoke of deep anxiety. Whatever was troubling her went far beyond lesson plans and budget cuts. "Mr. Wells," she said suddenly, what do you do when someone you care about is in real danger?" Jasper's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Honey, that's a strange question." "I was just thinking about that news story," she said quickly, "the one about the missing businessmen." But her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, and in that look, I saw something that chilled me. Genuine fear and a desperate need to communicate something she couldn't say aloud. I finished my wine and set down the glass with deliberate finality. "Thank you both for a lovely evening. I should head home." As I stood to leave, certainty settled in my chest like a stone. Something was very wrong here, and whatever it was, Violet knew about it. The cool May evening wrapped around me like a familiar blanket as I descended the steps from Jasper's building. 55° according to the weather app I'd checked earlier. Perfect for the 45-minute walk home through Chicago's winding neighborhoods. I needed the time to think, to process what I'd witnessed during that strange dinner performance. Wicker Park's trendy streets buzzed with Tuesday night energy. Couples emerging from craft cocktail bars, young professionals grabbing late dinners at bistro with outdoor seating. The contrast with Jasper's cramped apartment and Violet's nervous energy felt stark. Here was the Chicago my son could have thrived in if he'd made different choices. I pulled my jacket tighter and began the familiar route toward Oak Park. My mind methodically cataloging the evening's inconsistencies, Violet's constant phone checking, Jasper's rehearsed stories of redemption, the poker chips I'd glimpse in their kitchen drawer. My business instincts honed by 40 years of evaluating people in situations screamed that something fundamental was wrong. The commercial district gradually gave way to quieter residential streets. Streetlights became more sporadic, casting pools of yellow light connected by stretches of shadow. I passed a 24-hour diner where shift workers grabbed coffee, a closed bookstore with handwritten signs advertising poetry readings, empty bus stop benches waiting for tomorrow's commuters. At 9:47 p.m., 17 minutes into my walk, my phone buzzed against my chest. I stopped beneath a particularly bright streetlight, noting the unknown number on the screen. "Don't forget to look around you." I stared at the message, reading it twice before my fingers moved to reply. "Is this a threat?" The response came immediately. "This is rescue. Some psycher kids playing pranks." I tried calling the number back but got the automated message. "The number you have dialed is not in service." Years of business had taught me to document everything, so I screenshot both messages before sliding the phone back into my jacket pocket. But I kept it easily accessible. The next few blocks felt different somehow. Sound seemed amplified. My own footsteps on concrete, the distant hum of traffic, a dog barking somewhere in the darkness. I found myself glancing over my shoulder more frequently, though I told myself it was paranoia brought on by cryptic text messages and family drama. Then I noticed the car, black sedan moving slower than traffic warranted, maintaining the same distance behind me for 3 blocks. When I crossed at the light, it crossed. When I turned down a side street to test my suspicions, its headlights followed, cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. My heart rate increased, and not just from the physical exertion of walking. Mabel's voice echoed in my memory. "Trust your instincts, Urban. They've kept you alive in business. They'll keep you alive everywhere else." The sedan crept closer, its engine purring like a satisfied cat. I could make out 2 figures in the front seats, though the tinted windows obscured their faces. My pace unconsciously quickened, muscle memory from childhood games of hide and seek suddenly feeling relevant again. Empty streets stretched ahead. Residential blocks where porch lights provided minimal illumination. The contrast with Wicker Park's bustling energy was striking. Here I was alone with whatever intentions lurked behind those headlights. I turned down another side street, my business shoes clicking against pavement with increasing urgency. The car's turn signal blinked once, twice before it followed me into the shadows. No longer coincidence, no longer paranoia. I was being hunted. The black sedan accelerated as I broke into what could generously be called a fast walk. At 65, my running days were largely behind me, but desperation provided motivation that my joints couldn't ignore. Behind me, Car door slammed with the finality of a judge's gavel. "Stop, old man. We just need toe talk." The voice carried authority mixed with annoyance, like a teacher calling after a truant student. But teachers didn't pursue people through dark Chicago alleys, and something in the speaker's tone suggested our conversation wouldn't be pleasant.
Police, help!
I shouted, though the residential street remained stubbornly empty. Porch lights stayed off, windows remained dark. Tuesday night in a working-class neighborhood meant early bedtimes, and minds focused on tomorrow's responsibilities. "Shut up and get him." A second voice, younger and more aggressive. Heavy footsteps echoed behind me, gaining ground despite my best efforts. I ducked into an alley between two rowesses, using parked cars and overflowing garbage cans as obstacles between myself and my pursuers. My chest tightened with each labored breath. The physical exertion combined with adrenaline created a dangerous cocktail for a man my age. Exactly the kind of stress my doctor had warned me to avoid. But stopping wasn't an option when anonymous voices discussed getting me in tones that suggested violence. The alley opened onto another street, this one darker and more industrial. Loading docks and storage buildings created a maze of shadows and hiding places. I pressed myself against a brick wall, feeling the cold seep through my jacket while my heart hammered against my ribs. Where did that old guy go? He can't have gotten far. Split up. You check the left side, I'll take the right. Their coordination suggested experience with this type of work. Not random criminals looking for a quick robbery, but professionals executing a specific plan. The realization made my blood run cold. I spotted salvation in the form of an old storage building tucked behind a row of closed shops. The door stood slightly ajar, probably forgotten by the last worker to leave. With my pursuers' voices growing closer, I made a desperate sprint across the open space. "What do you want from me?" I gasped, though they were already out of earshot. The storage building smelled of motor oil, old wood, and years of accumulated dust. Garden tools hung from wall hooks. Paint cans created small mountains in corners, and wooden crates provided perfect cover for a man trying to become invisible. I positioned myself behind the largest stack, struggling to quiet my breathing while my heart continued its frantic rhythm. Through the dirty windows, I could see flashlight beams sweeping the alley. My hunters had come prepared for a search operation, which meant this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Someone had planned this encounter. Someone who knew my routine and predicted my walking route home. The shed door creaked ominously as one of them tested it. I held my breath, pressing myself deeper into the shadows behind the crates. Dust particles danced in the thin beam of light that penetrated my hiding place, and I fought the urge to sneeze. "Check in there." "Nah, it's locked up tight." "Old man's probably halfway to Oak Park by now." Their voices grew fainter as they moved away from my hiding spot, but I remained frozen in place. Mabel had always said patience was my greatest business asset. Tonight, it might save my life. Outside car doors slammed again, followed by the sound of an engine starting. I waited another 15 minutes, counting each second before finally allowing myself to breathe normally. Whatever was happening, whoever these men were, I was certain of one thing. This wasn't random crime. Someone had sent them specifically for me. Crouched behind wooden crates that smelled of decades-old paint and forgotten projects, I waited in the musty darkness of the storage shed. My heart had finally slowed to something approaching normal rhythm, though the tightness in my chest lingered like an unwelcome reminder of my age and limitations. Through the grimy windows, I could see me pursuers' flashlight beams sweeping the alley with methodical precision. Where did that old guy disappear to? The first voice carried frustration and professional annoyance. Maybe he managed to hide somewhere. It's pretty dark out here. The second man sounded younger, less experienced, possibly questioning the wisdom of this nighttime chase. I shifted carefully behind the crates, trying to find a position where I could hear without risking discovery. A paint can brushed against my elbow, creating a soft scraping sound that made me freeze completely. The flashlight beams paused in their sweep, and for 30 seconds that felt like hours, silence dominated the alley. "Jasper won't pay us for nothing. We need to find him." The words hit me like a physical blow. Jasper, my son, the boy I'd raised, educated, supported through countless failures and mistakes, had hired these men to hunt me through Chicago's dark streets. The dinner invitation, the humble apologies, Violet's nervous behavior. All of it was orchestrated theater designed to position me for this moment. Forget it, he's already scared. We'll try again tomorrow. I covered my mouth with both hands, not trusting myself to remain silent as the full magnitude of my son's betrayal settled into my consciousness. Every instinct screamed to confront this impossible reality, to demand explanations that could somehow make sense of a son paying strangers to terrorize his own father. Boss said just to scare him anyway, right? Make him think twice about refusing help to family. Yeah, but if we can't find him, how's he going to know he was scared? They were moving away now, their voices becoming fainter as they searched other areas of the alley system. But I remained motionless, processing not just their words, but the casual tone in which they discussed my fear as a commodity to be purchased and delivered. The car engine started again, followed by the sound of tires on gravel as they drove away. Still, I waited another 15 minutes, counting each second while my mind wrestled with a new and horrifying reality. My son, the baby Mabel, had nursed through fever. The child who'd run to me after nightmares, the young man I'd believed could still be saved, had crossed a line that transformed him from wayward son to genuine threat. When I finally emerged from my hiding place, the alley felt different. No longer just a route between destinations, but a battlefield where I'd learned that family bonds could be weaponized against love itself. The cool night air carried the scent of approaching rain, and in the distance the city hummed with its usual indifference to personal tragedies. Violet's warning text made perfect sense now. She'd known what was planned, had risked her own safety to warn a man she barely knew because her conscience couldn't bear watching. Murder disguised as family intervention. While her husband plotted my intimidation, or worse, she'd chosen to become my unlikely guardian angel. I needed to call Martin, needed to involve police, needed to document everything before Jasper could construct plausible denials or eliminate evidence. But first I needed to reach a place of safety, somewhere public enough that hired muscle wouldn't dare approach. The 24-hour diner I'd passed during my walk beckoned like a lighthouse in a storm, its neon sign promising sanctuary and witnesses. As I emerged from the alley and began walking toward those welcoming lights, I realized my son had succeeded in one goal tonight. He definitely scared me, but not in the way he'd intended. The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour convenience store buzzed overhead as I fumbled with coins at the payphone, my hands trembling so violently that quarters slipped through my fingers twice before I managed to dial 911. The young clerk behind bulletproof glass watched me with mild concern, probably assuming I was another late-night drunk having a crisis. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report an attempted assault. 2 men chased me through alleys near Wicker Park. I want to speak with Detective Martin Reyes at District 18. The operator's voice remained professionally calm. Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical attention? No, I'm safe now, but Detective Reyes is expecting my call. Tell him it's Urban Wells. 20 minutes later, Martin's patrol car pulled into the convenience store parking lot with practiced efficiency. Through the window, I watched him emerge, tall, solid, wearing the expression of a man who'd seen enough late-night emergencies to remain calm regardless of circumstances. Urban, he approached with careful steps, noting my torn jacket and disheveled appearance. What happened to you? The relief of seeing a friendly face, someone trained to handle situations beyond my business experience, nearly overwhelmed me. Martin, I think my son wants to kill me. We sat in his patrol car while I provided every detail I could remember. The dinner invitation, Violet's nervous behavior, the warning text message, the black sedan that had hunted me through Chicago's dark streets. Martin took methodical notes, asking specific questions about timing, locations, and physical descriptions. You said one of them mentioned Jasper by name. Jasper won't pay us for nothing. We need to find him. I repeated the words exactly as I'd heard them. They were hired, Martin. My own son paid criminals to terrorize me. Martin photographed the warning text messages on my phone before the battery died completely. We'll need you to come to the station and make a formal statement. Can you describe the vehicle in more detail? Black sedan? Probably a Toyota Camry, Illinois plates, though I only caught part of the number. Small dent on the passenger side, tinted windows. 2 men. Both appeared to be in their 30s. Within minutes, Martin had issued a Bolo alert through dispatch. The efficiency of police procedure contrasted sharply with the chaos I'd experienced just hours earlier. Here was order system, the rule of law, responding to criminal behavior with appropriate force. At District 18, the police station hummed with late-night activity. Radio chatter provided constant background noise. Phones rang with the persistence of urban emergency, and officers processed paperwork with the methodical attention of civil servants who understood that details mattered in courtrooms. Urban, that's serious accusation. Are you certain about what you heard? I met his eyes steadily. One of those guys said Jasper's name. They were hired by him. Martin's expression hardened. We'll find them. Your description of the car is detailed enough to work with. As I signed my formal statement, documenting every moment from dinner to discovery, Martin coordinated with patrol units searching for the black sedan. The business part of my mind appreciated the systematic approach, evidence collection, witness statements, coordination between departments. But underneath the procedural calm, fury burned at the calculated nature of Myson's betrayal. My phone plugged into a charger Martin had provided buzzed with a radio call. Detective Reyes, we have a vehicle matching the description parked outside an apartment building in Pilsen. Martin grabbed his jacket, adrenaline sharpening his professional demeanor. Urban, we may have found them. Radio chatter filled District 18 as Martin coordinated the arrest operation from his desk, surrounded by the controlled chaos of night shift police work. I watched through the window as backup units moved through Chicago's early morning streets, converging on an apartment building where two criminals waited, probably celebrating what they believed was a successful intimidation. Unit 47 confirmed the license plate matches the witness description. Affirmative, Detective, Illinois Delta. Charlie 7219 vehicles cold. Suspects likely inside the building. The arrest took less than 30 minutes. Tony Marchetti and Vince Rodriguez, ages 32 and 29 respectively, were taken into custody without resistance. Both had prior records for assault and intimidation. Professional muscle for hire. Exactly the type of men would contact through his gambling connections. Martin separated them immediately, using standard interrogation techniques I recognized from television, but had never witnessed in person. Tony broke first, probably calculating that cooperation might reduce his sentence. Urban, we found them and we have a confession. I looked up from the police station coffee that had grown cold in my hands. What did they say? Listen, this Jasper Wells paid us $5,000 to scare the old man. Martin read from his notes, his voice carrying professional disgust. Half up front, half on completion. They were supposed to make it look like random street crime scare. They wanted to kill me. Martin's expression grew grimmer. There's more. Jasper told them you have heart problems. Strong fear could have finished you without them laying a finger on you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down heavily in the plastic chair, feeling every one of my 65 years. My son hadn't just hired criminals to threaten me. He'd weaponized my own mortality, using medical information shared in confidence to orchestrate what would have appeared to be a natural death. He knew about my heart condition. The statement came out as barely a whisper. I told him last Christmas that my doctor was monitoring irregular rhythms. Tony's phone shows text messages arranging the job. Bank records will show Jasper's payment. We have enough evidence to arrest him for solicitation of assault, possibly attempted murder. Vince corroborated every detail of Tony's confession, both men realizing that their amateur hour criminal enterprise had crossed lines that carried serious prison time. They described meeting Jasper at a coffee shop near his apartment, where he'd provided my photo, my address, and specific instructions about using my heart condition to create a natural death. The plan was elegant, Martin said, reviewing their statements. Scare you badly enough to trigger a heart attack, then disappear. No physical assault, no direct murder, just an old man who died from the stress of random street crime. Evidence accumulated with the mechanical precision of professional law enforcement. Text messages between Jasper and Tony arranging payment, surveillance footage from near the coffee shop showing their meeting, bank records tracing money from Jasper's account to Tony's. My son had been thorough but not careful, leaving a paper trail that would satisfy any prosecutor. He's at home right now, Martin said, preparing the arrest warrant, probably sleeping peacefully, assuming his plan worked. I asked to be present when they arrested Jasper, though Martin insisted I remain in a police vehicle at a safe distance. Some twisted part of me needed to see my son's face when he realized his carefully orchestrated murder had become evidence in his own trial. Martin, I need to understand something. I looked at the confession statement spread across his desk. How long does someone spend in prison for trying to kill their father with his gambling debts? And your testimony about financial motive, 15 to 20 years minimum. This isn't a crime of passion. It's premeditated attempted murder. As Martin and his team prepared for Jasper's arrest, I remained alone in the station, surrounded by the institutional sounds of justice processing criminal behavior. My son, the baby who'd once fallen asleep in my arms, had calculated the exact amount of fear required to stop my heart. The magnitude of that betrayal settled over me like a blanket made of ice. Dawn filtered through the police station windows as I dozed fitfully in a chair Martin had positioned in a quiet corner of the detective bullpen. The institutional coffee had long since grown cold, but the caffeine and adrenaline combination kept real sleep at bay. At 8 sharp, Martin returned with fresh coffee and news that would close this chapter of my life forever. Jasper's in custody, arrested at home at 6:30 this morning without incident. I straightened in the uncomfortable chair, feeling muscles protest from the night's activities. How did he react? Complete shock. He tried claiming innocence until we showed him Tony's confession and the bank records. Then he broke down completely. Martin settled at his desk, organizing paperwork with professional efficiency. He admitted to everything. My phone, fully charged overnight, buzzed with an incoming message, the unknown number that had saved my life. I'd almost forgotten about that mysterious warning in the chaos of arrests and confessions. I typed carefully, "Thank you for saving my life." "Who are you?" The response arrived within minutes. "I'm Violet." I couldn't let him do this. "You're a good person." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by questions. "Why didn't you stop him earlier?" I was afraid. But when I realized he was really going to, "I'm sorry." Through subsequent messages, Violet explained how she discovered Jasper's plan the day before our dinner, found herself torn between loyalty to her husband and basic human decency, eventually buying a burner phone to send an anonymous warning. She was filing for divorce and had already agreed to testify against Jasper in exchange for immunity. "She saved your life," Martin observed, reading over my shoulder. "That warning text gave you the awareness you needed to recognize the chase for what it was." The legal proceedings would be straightforward. Jasper faced charges of solicitation of assault and attempted murder. Tony and Vince would likely accept plea deals in exchange for their testimony. With confessions, bank records, and text message evidence, the case was prosecutorial gold. "I want to see him," I told Martin one last time. The meeting took place in an interview room at the station. Jasper sat in orange jail coveralls, his hands cuffed to the table, looking smaller and more pathetic than I'd ever seen him. Gone was the aggressive manipulator from Monday night, replaced by a broken man who'd gambled away not just money, but tiny hope of redemption. "Dad, I was desperate. Those people were going to you made your choice." I kept my voice level, businesslike. "I gave you everything, and you chose to try to kill me for more. It wasn't supposed to be murder, just enough to maybe to stop my heart, using information I shared with you in confidence." I stood to leave. "You're no longer my son." Later that morning, back home with a police escort, I called my lawyer to begin the process of changing my will. Jasper's name would be removed completely, his inheritance redirected to charitable organizations and a trust fund for Violet's future. She'd shown more moral courage in one text message than her husband had demonstrated in 38 years. In my study, surrounded by family photographs that would need updating, I reflected on Mabel's wisdom. She'd understood Jasper's nature better than I had, warned me repeatedly about enabling his destructive behavior. If she were alive, she would have stopped this madness years ago through sheer force of maternal authority. The broken family photo from Monday night still sat on my desk, its cracked glass creating prismatic reflections in the morning sunlight. I placed it carefully in the trash along with any remaining illusions about the son I thought I was protecting. Justice would run its course through proper legal channels. Jasper would serve his time. Tony and Vince would face consequences for their choices. And Violet would build a new life free from the toxicity that had nearly consumed us all. For the first time in years, I could plan for the future, without wondering what crisis Jasper would create next. Wells Tech Solutions would continue under new leadership. My wealth would benefit worthy causes, and I could finally live without looking over my shoulder for the next manipulation. Sometimes cutting toxic people out of your life, even family, is the only way to find peace. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.